We're now delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. It's a very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for joining us this afternoon. And let me start by asking you, Mr. Ambassador, following the activation of Egypt's membership in the BRICS, how do you see the economic outcome, first on the short term, then the long term for Egypt?
Well, first of all, we have to mention, of course, that Russia this year have resumed the presidency.
Yes.
And there is already a speech from President Yeltsin welcoming Egypt and all the other new countries who joined BRICS into the group. Of course, he mentioned several points which I think are going to have its implication on Egypt's position. Of course, he spoke about tightening the relationship, the economical relationship between the BRICS countries into something more fruitful to the benefit of all the countries. But on the other hand, he also mentioned that he is looking forward to more participation and more, a little bit of a focus on increasing the foreign policy coordination. It means there is also a political aspect of this relationship within the BRICS. But if we are going to talk about the economic side, of course, there is plenty of benefits with those economic superpowers, whether we are talking about internationally or even on an African dimension with South Africa.
Yes.
Those are big countries, especially China and Russia. They have strong economies, and Egypt could benefit a lot from having a closer relationship economically with these countries. And I think that in the midst of all the political problem that we're facing in our country, whether we are talking the West or the East or the South, thank God in the Mediterranean everything is calm so far. So we are having problems at our borders. But in the midst of all that, we are going to start a fruitful relationship with international partners worldwide. And I think we have to benefit from this.
Absolutely. Your Excellency, how do you see BRICS as an introduction to a new economic world order, opening up new possibilities for different kinds of trading partnerships with different countries for Egypt?
Well, I prefer personally to think about it as another window of opportunity with various countries of the world. I don't want it to be thought from the public as a totally individual new aspect, regardless of relations, economic relations that we had with previous countries, with other countries such as the West in general and the United States, which were traditionally our partners in our world commerce. So this is something that should complement what we have already as another window of cooperation, economic cooperation with other countries in the world, and not to be taken as a rival to what we have already. And accordingly, the relationships that we have with other countries that are not members of BRICS should continue and should also be strengthened and more fortified. So,
yes, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, indeed. Let me ask you, why do you see a growing desire, Your Excellency, by many countries to join BRICS? Do you think there is a movement away from the traditional partners when it comes to economic communities, and many countries are trying to branch out?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, we started by seeing manipulation,
yes,
especially political manipulation in many developing countries by the international monetary system and world international system. And we found that this was a little bit, I don't want to go to say abusive, but it was a little bit unfair to many countries, especially on our continent in Africa. And so many countries are seeking for other opportunities for them to prosper away from the traditional points. As we have seen last year, the French president hosted something related, conference related to the debt and trying to find a new monetary system that can help the national organizations as well as the developing countries, not to forget the developed countries already who are seeking to maximize their benefit from the current world order. So as I said, the most important thing is that this is another window for many countries to join the international economic system without suffering from the abuse it represents in some cases that we've seen.
Absolutely. In other news, Your Excellency, the African Development Bank has reviewed Africa's 2024 economic growth forecast, decreasing it to 3.8%, down from about 4.3%. What are some of the reasons for this downgrade? Amongst the reasons they have, of course, spoken about were global challenges.
Well, as you know, like many other regions and countries in the world, Africa was heavily impacted by multiple global shocks, including the tightening global financial conditions, which I just spoke about, and of course the disruption of the chain distribution. And the global growth was affected by the Russian-Ukrainian war. As we have seen, many countries in Europe have been heavily implicated with this war, to the point that they no longer import the quantities that they used to import from the African countries, which is famous for exporting raw materials. And accordingly, this led to a slowdown in the African economy that is basically basing itself on exporting goods. Not to mention that the price for the commodities and the raw materials that the Africans are selling is usually decided by the buyer's decision and not by the market price. We've seen in some countries that had or led a certain political instability and in sometimes a coup, that they decided to sell a certain product with like 20 times the original price they used to sell it with, which means that they were totally selling it with a price that does not reflect the real price of the raw material. And this is not just in this country, but in many other countries, which led to several negotiations between African countries and the traditional importers in order to have a more just and fair price to its product. Of course, we have to mention also the final repercussions of the COVID and the weather changes and the search for green economy and green industry all around the Africa, which costs money, but at the same time not having enough funds to or resources to fund these needs.
Right. Finally, Your Excellency, if I may, how do you see, the need or the growing global challenges pushing for the activation of intra-African trade mechanisms, including the free AFCTFA, the free trade agreement between African nations?
Well, as I said, African countries are not equal. If we remember the experience and what happened with the European Union as we see it right now,
yes,
we see that they had to reach a certain level to equate to each other in order to be able to get inside the system that will treat them equally. Unfortunately, so far in Africa, countries are not equal economically and politically, and thus they cannot be treated equally, and this is slowing down the process of the African free zone, which will actually necessitate that bit by bit, African countries have to reach a certain minimum, all of them, at the same time in order to implement one rule that will apply to all of them. We have some countries who are advanced industrially, like Egypt, for instance, or South Africa, and some other countries that are known to just export their raw material to other countries. So they cannot be treated equally in this trade agreement. And accordingly, what we need is that we need to push all the African countries, politically and economically, to reach a certain level that will enable it to trade with a more ease into this new financial era.
Absolutely. I'd like to thank you very, very much, Your Excellency Ambassador Medhat Meligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister. Thank you very much, sir, for all your time and your insight, and for joining us on today's edition of Africa Today. And to wrap up today's show, our final news item, moving to sports, where AFCON's defending champion Senegal said they aim to repeat the success of their 2023 campaign. Statement was made by the Senegal captain Sadio Mane, who now plays for Saudi Arabia's Al Nassr. We have more details in this story.